Fluorescent lights hummed softly, casting an unwelcoming glare over the empty halls of St. Mary's Hospital. I had been working the night shift for 6 months now, and the eerie quiet of the place never ceased to unnerve me. Our small, understaffed hospital was a far cry from the bustling city hospitals I had trained in, but it had its own peculiar charm, or so I tried to convince myself. It was a particularly slow night, and I found myself nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee, desperately trying to stay awake. My shift had started uneventfully, the same routine of checking vitals, administering medications, and comforting the occasional restless patient. But as the clock inched towards 3 a.m., things began to take a turn for the strange. It started with the lights in room 207 flickering ominously. At first, I thought it was just another electrical glitch, something not uncommon in our old hospital. I made a mental note to report it to maintenance, but as I approached the room, a sense of unease washed over me. The flickering stopped abruptly, leaving the room in an unsettling silence. The patient in room 207 was an elderly woman recovering from a mild stroke. As I stepped inside, I noticed her sitting up in bed, eyes wide with fear. She clutched the bed sheets, her knuckles white. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, eyes darting around the room. I felt a chill run down my spine. Suddenly, the room's temperature plummeted, and I could see my breath misting in the air. The lights flickered again, and a shadow passed across the room, darker and more solid than any natural shadow should be. I checked her vitals, which were stable, and gave her a mild sedative to help her sleep. As I left the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Returning to my station, I decided to check the patient logs, hoping to distract myself from the unsettling encounter. That's when I noticed an entry I didn't recognize, room 213, a patient named Michael Harris. Curiosity piqued, I accessed the file, but found it empty. There was no admission date, no medical history, nothing. Confused, I made my way to room 213. The door was ajar, and as I peered inside, I saw a man sitting on the edge of the bed, staring out the window. He was dressed in a hospital gown, his thin frame almost ghostly under the harsh lights. Something about him seemed off, like he didn't quite belong. I stepped closer, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. He turned slowly, his eyes meeting mine. They were dark, almost black, and seemed to bore into my soul. He didn't speak, just continued to stare at me with those unnerving eyes. I glanced at the monitor next to his bed, but it was off. None of the equipment was functioning, and there was no record of his vitals. Backing out of the room, I intended to report the anomaly, but as I reached the nurse's station, the computer screen flickered and went black. Panic surged through me as the hospital's emergency lights kicked in, casting the halls in a dim, red glow. My radio crackled to life, but all I could hear was static. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I decided to check the hospital's records manually. As I rifled through the old, dusty files in the archive room, I stumbled upon something chilling. An old newspaper clipping dated 1953 detailed a fire that had ravaged the hospital, claiming several lives. Among the victims was a nurse named Emily Harper, my name. My hands shook as I read the article. The nurse had died trying to save a patient named Michael Harris. The coincidence was too eerie to ignore. Just then, I was hit with a blinding headache, and a vision overtook me. I saw the hospital engulfed in flames, smoke filling the air. Panicked screams echoed through the corridors as I, or rather the nurse from the vision, frantically searched for survivors. I found Michael Harris lying on a gurney, unconscious. As I tried to move him out, a beam collapsed, pinning us both. I gasped, the vision dissipating as quickly as it had come. I knew I had to confront Michael Harris to understand what was happening. Gathering my courage, I made my way back to room 213. The door was closed, and the temperature seemed to drop as I approached. Pushing the door open, I found the room empty. The bed was neatly made, and there were no signs of the man I had seen earlier. Confusion and fear mingled as I turned to leave. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper, calling my name. I spun around, but the room was still empty. The whisper grew louder, more insistent. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. My heart pounded in my chest as I followed the sound down the hall, past past rooms that seemed to watch me with silent anticipation. It led me to the old wing of the hospital, long since abandoned after the fire. The smell of smoke still lingered in the air, and the walls were blackened with soot. I hesitated at the entrance, the memories of the vision fresh in my mind. Stepping inside, the whispers intensified, guiding me to a room at the end of the hall. The door creaked open, revealing a room frozen in time. The charred remnants of a bed, the singed curtains, and the faint outline of a body on the floor. My stomach churned as I realized I was standing in the very room where Emily Harper had perished. A figure materialized before me, flickering like a flame. It was Michael Harris, or rather his spirit. His eyes were filled with sorrow as he reached out to me. Another vision overtook me, more vivid than the last. I saw Emily Harper's final moments, the agony of being trapped, the desperation to save Michael Harris. The realization hit me like a freight train. I was Emily Harper, reborn into a new life, carrying the weight of my past. As I tried to comprehend the vision, the room's atmosphere grew heavy, and a sense of dread enveloped me. I noticed symbols etched into the walls, faintly glowing. They were part of a ritual to banish spirits, something I had read about in old occult texts. The ground beneath me trembled, and the walls seemed to close in. Panic surged through me as I realized I had to act quickly. Recalling the symbols I had seen, I grabbed a piece of chalk from a nearby supply closet and began drawing them on the floor around the outline of Emily Harper's body. As I finished, the room grew darker, the shadows deepening. Suddenly, a deafening crash echoed through the room, and I spun around to see the shadowy figure from before, now more solid and menacing, advancing towards me. I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder, and I screamed, dropping the chalk. The room seemed to spin, and I was thrown into another vision. I saw a dark, twisted version of the hospital, corridors lined with grotesque figures whispering my name. A monstrous shadow loomed over me, its eyes glowing with malevolence. I fought to regain control, focusing on the symbols I had drawn. Back in the room, I whispered the incantation I had memorized, hoping it would be enough to break the curse. The shadowy figure loomed closer, its presence suffocating. The symbols on the floor began to glow brighter, casting an ethereal light. The air grew still, and for a moment, I feared nothing had changed. But then, a warm light enveloped the room, dispelling the darkness. The spirits of Emily Harper and Michael Harris appeared before me, their forms solid and real. They looked at me with gratitude, their expressions peaceful. As they faded into the light, a sense of peace washed over me. The hospital returned to its normal state, the equipment functioning perfectly, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. I resumed my duties, but I could feel the change within me. The memories of my past life lingered, but they no longer haunted me. I had uncovered the truth and ended the cycle of suffering. As dawn broke, I stepped outside, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. The nightmare was over, and I was ready to embrace my new life, free from the shadows of the past. But I knew I would never forget the night I discovered the truth behind the unlisted patient and the hidden past that bound us together.